Because I think that's really important, especially for young people, to actually do that self-assessment and find that passion. Do you have any advice?
I think many kids and many grown-ups do figure out over time what their passions are. And sometimes we let I don't think it's that hard. I think what happens though sometimes is that we let our intellectual selves overrule those passions. And so that's what needs to be guarded against. Kids are very good about knowing what their passions are.
I love that, because I think I've seen you describe this way, that you've always maintained that sense of wonder. I think that's what kids have, but we lose it somehow along the way.
Yes, everybody, it's a gift if you can keep your childlike sense of wonder. And it helps with creativity, it helps to have fun. You laugh more and play more if you keep that childlike sense of wonder. What we're really focused on is thinking long term, putting the customer at the center of our universe, and inventing. Those are the three big ideas. I don't think that you can invent on behalf of customers unless you're willing to think long term, because a lot of invention doesn't work. If you're going to invent, it means you're going to experiment. You have to think long term. So these three ideas, customer centricity, long-term thinking, and a passion for invention, those go together. That's how we do it. And by the way, we have a lot of fun doing it that way.
Amazing about your success is that your timing was good too. How does an innovator actually identify that historical momentum, that Kitty Hawk moment? You recognize what was happening with the internet and you said, you know what, there's actually a room for me to start with books and then move on. How do you do that? How do you find the time and the momentum and the zeitgeist?
I think everybody has their own passion, their own thing that they're interested in, and then you're very alert to the things that are in the sphere of influence of that passion.
So your passion has led you to change the world, frankly, with Amazon. But yet you've got Blue Origin, you've got Bezos Explorations. Why can't somebody like you just rest on your laurels? Go play golf.
Well, I love what I do. I also have 4 kids. I have a wife that I love. I have a lot of passions and interests. But one of them is the pace of change. I love the fact that I get to work with these big smart teams. The people I work with are so smart, and they're self-selected for loving to invent on behalf of customers. And so, it's not, do I love every moment of every day? No, that's why they call it work. There are things that I don't enjoy, but if I'm really objective about it and I look at it, I'm so lucky to be working alongside all these passionate people, and I love it.
How do you remain nimble? Because there is somebody in their dorm room who could eat you up for lunch the next day.
My belief on this is, first of all, that's completely correct, and you can never assure anybody that can't happen. But I think if you have a customer-centric culture, that cures a lot of ills, because we wake up, let's say you're the leader in a particular arena, if you're competitor focused and you're already the leader, then where does your energy come from? Whereas if you're customer focused and you're already the leader, customers are never satisfied. So if you're customer focused, you're always waking up, how can we make that customer say, wow? How can we, our energy, our passion, we want to impress our customers. We want them to say, wow, is that kind of divine discontent comes from observing customers and noticing that, things can always be better.
There's always a sense that people have that it's really hard to come with answers. All the answers have already been discovered in one way or another. And I think that's not the case. And I sort of divide things up into conventions, which are things everybody knows to be true. The other extreme, there are mysteries, things that nobody can figure out. And in between are these things that I call secrets, which are things that you could figure out. They're hard, but if you really work at it, you could figure something out. And one thought that I have is that there are many secrets left to be discovered. I actually think that this is a somewhat non-conventional view, because I think the conventional view is that most secrets have been discovered and that there's nothing new to find. And so, and this is it is true certainly of certain domains. But I think most things are not like that. And I think there are a lot of fields where new things can be found. We're often discouraged by sort of a version of globalization. We think there are 7 billion other people in the world, and there will always be someone who will have already thought of it. And if no one will have thought of it before us, it must be almost impossibly hard. And so it ends up being this sort of self-fulfilling thing where we don't even try. And I do think the only people who will discover secrets are people who work at it and who try doing it. And I think that many of these great companies have something like this at the core. It's some domain of knowledge, some area where people think they can figure out a lot more. At PayPal, we were very interested in this, in the intersection of money and cryptography. Could you create a new digital currency on the internet? And it was a fairly idiosyncratic field. There were a small number of people working on it. There was this financial cryptography community, and you could sort of understand the field. You could get to the frontiers, and you could explore it quite a bit more. So I think the second idea I want to leave you with is there still is a frontier left, and the frontier is not infinitely far away. There's certain places where the frontier has been closed, so geographically it's kind of closed, but there are many places where you can still get to the frontier, and it's actually, there are many directions you can go where the frontier is close and where there's a lot left to be discovered.
You have developed this, at least, profile of a young man in a hurry. With all the rough elbows that suggest.
I think it's, how should I put it? We look at all of the cities and we know that the transportation systems there are just they're not serving everybody's needs. I mean, even here in New York with a great mass transit system, there's still 2.5 million cars going over those bridges every day. And so we just believe we can help the city do better. I guess most successful entrepreneurs are not waiting
for it to come to them,
for success, and not waiting for progress. We are generally a little bit forward-leaning when it comes to trying to make progress happen. For me, it's about problem solving and loving to solve problems. And so if you are passionate about solving problems, sometimes I just like to describe this as like, imagine a really great math professor with no problems to solve, right? A great math professor is somebody who wants the hardest problems, who wants to solve them and loves solving them. That's kind of how I feel about my work. And so it's not about a man in a hurry. It's more about really interesting problems in the world and how do you lean into them and solve things that people maybe thought weren't even possible to solve, and that's fun.
For us, we don't really aspire to be somebody other than ourselves. And part of being ourselves is sort of reimagining the way things could be done. So we like to take the impossible, we like to take the old way of doing things and just completely change it. That's part of who we are. But there are great CEOs, great founders, great leaders out there, and there's something to learn from all of them. In fact, there's something to learn from the ones that aren't great too. Like, again, everybody sees success, they see failure, and we see that personally and we should learn from it, but why not learn from other people's success and failure? There's something to learn from all of them. It depends how you look at it, but when you have sort of this problem-solving culture, the core group sort of depends on the problem that's being solved. And so it's very dynamic what that core group is and on what problem. I have 10, 11 direct reports, and then depending on what the problems of the day are, can determine how many of those folks are in a particular problem. And by the way, a lot of problems getting solved that I'm not involved in. And so figuring out which ones that you go into, how do you prioritize it, how do you get to the future faster is one of the things we spend a lot of time sort of architecting.
Silicon Valley and the state of Silicon Valley, do you think it's at a high point of invention right now, or at a plateau, or at a low point, or?
Well, I think there's
jumping off.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me, look, I've been an entrepreneur since the late 90s, and I remember in 2001 I was raising money. I was raising money in the fall of 2001 for a networking software company, and I remember going to one of the restaurants in Palo Alto, which used to be bustling, and you'd have to book get a reservation like a month ahead of time or something, and it was empty. It was like tumbleweeds. And I remember a VC telling me that all the things that could be invented, this is 2001, all the things that could be invented in software had been invented, and that there was no more innovation left in software. And right, so that irrational sort of, there's irrational exuberance and irrational pessimism. I'm just generally an innovation optimist. I just think there's just problems to be solved everywhere, and once you solve them, you already see what's, I'd like to say boredom is only the result of a lack of imagination. And the minute you solve one thing, you just sit down for a few minutes and then you come up with like 10 more ideas. So I think I'm an optimist, like there's just so much more to do. I think what's very interesting, and maybe this is because of our global reach and just where we've been, is Silicon Valley, I think, has been sort of the North Star for innovation or the hub of innovation globally. And I think that is no longer going to be a thing. I think if we go 5 years out, you're going to start to see hubs of innovation. This is about to be real, at least with a couple major ones, right?
I'm just going to ask you one more question because our time is up. You're worth a lot of money now. What's the most expensive thing you've bought?
Well, I think what a lot of people don't know is that I've never sold a single Uber share. So the most expensive thing I bought before Uber started, and it's my home. And it was right around $1 million.
Okay.
So I got a mortgage.
You still have a mortgage?
Yeah.
Amazing. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Travis.
Okay.
Cheongkong is the Cantonese word for the Yangtze, China's longest river, and it is more than just a name for Li.
呢個 Yangtze River
點你解釋啊？
就長江咧，點解能夠成為長江咧？就係你咧咩水嚟到你都可以吸收，你都 welcome。
Yeah。
所以你做生意，因為我自己咧。當我22歲做生意嘅時候，我表面係好謙虛，但裏邊好泡，唔係咁好。所以我自己勸誡自己，做個名長江，你要做到長江咁大嘅水咧，你一定要謙虛，一定要吸收其他水嚟。
你好似長江，
我就想間公司咧有成就。但係我經營嘅方式咧，我採用咧 check and balance。你一定咧要令到用西方嘅管理模式，但係有個內心嘅哲覺咧，我就選咗中國儒家好有用嗰一 part。咁啊咁多年嚟都證明咧係。我哋都幾好，尤其高級行政人員咧，你驕睇我哋嘅 turnover 係好少驕傲嘅。
What's the lesson?
The lesson say you need to be very careful to manage the company. Also, don't investment and like a gambler.
The key pieces of advice Li Ka-shing is passing on to his sons.